You look better here than you did over there. I think this has been good for you. I bet I look more handsome here than I did over there. You know what you get when you cross a Unitarian with a Jehovah's Witness? You get somebody who knocks on your door but doesn't know why. Do you know what you get when you cross poison ivy with a four-leaf clover? Get a rash of good luck. I know, I can't believe I'm doing this either. But I have grandchildren. You know what you get when you cross a cow with a duck? Milk and quackers. You know what you get when you cross a cow with an octopus? You get a cow that can milk herself. I'm sorry, but one more. Do you know what you get when you cross a conservative Presbyterian with a stone? Nothing. They're the same thing. I'm a conservative Presbyterian. And I come to this place with mixed feelings. That's when you watch your mother-in-law go off a cliff in your new Cadillac. And you guys don't do anything the same here, the way you're supposed to do it. I was just getting used to speaking in a skating rink. And as a conservative Presbyterian, you have no idea how big a leap that is. And then you move into this place. But I like coming here. You know why? Because you smell like Jesus. You really do. I had 4 guys from Iowa who had arranged months earlier. They were here in Orlando to have lunch with me. And I was expecting a very dull, it was a pastor and 3 deacons, my favorite thing. And they show up, man, and they look like professional wrestlers. They are gigantic and laugh loud. When we walked into the restaurant, everybody turned around and looked at them. It was really kind of cool. And when the waitress came, they gave her $5. And one of the guys said, "Honey, this is not a tip. And we're going to take care of you with a tip. We just want to give you this ahead of time to say, we like you in Jesus' name. And you're going to be serving us. And we wanted to thank you for that." When it came time to pay the bill, they wouldn't let me leave the tip. They said, "We'll take care of the tip." And boy, they did. I think she went out and bought a Mercedes with the money they left on the table. And they wanted to get a picture with me. And it was outside the restaurant. One of them had a camera, and and they're so big. I mean, we laughed and talked about Jesus. Everybody was looking. And so we get out in front of the restaurant, and somebody came out, and I said, "Son, would you take a picture of us?" And he looked at these big professional wrestler types, and he said, "Of course, yes, sir, of course." So he took a picture. It was kind of like me standing between the 4, holding, like this. And when it was over, I was heading for the parking lot, and I turned back, and I said, "You know something? I've loved this. You guys smell like Jesus." And the biggest one said, "You smell like smoke. You smell like pipe smoke." And then, because he was afraid he offended me, he said, "But expensive pipe smoke." You can't get rid of it, man. Pipe smoke or Jesus. The smell's there, and that's whether you're meeting over there or in a small group, or whether you're meeting in this magnificent and wonderful place that Jesus has given you. When they asked me to come this weekend, they wanted me to continue with the series that Joel was doing on the distributed church. They asked me to center in on the 3rd chapter of the church for tomorrow, and I said in my pastoral kind way, when cows fly, when it gets really, really cold in a hot place, I'm going to do that. And then I prayed about it, and God told me to do it. He said, it's not for them, it's for you, and it will be good for you. So you need to know this is for me, it's not for you. If you get it, it's already done its work all week working on this. The church for tomorrow. If you have your Bible, open it to the 9th chapter of Matthew. And I wish I had time to read the entire chapter, because what I'm going to teach you this morning has to do with that entire chapter. But let's start at the 9th verse, where Matthew writes, as Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at a tax booth, and he said to him, follow me. And he rose and followed him. And as Jesus reclined at table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? But when he heard it, he said, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. Then the disciples of John came to him, saying, why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus said to them, can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they'll fast. No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment, and the tear is worse. Neither is new wine put into old wineskins. If it is, the skins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, and both are preserved. You know the difference between institutions and institutionalism? Institutions are necessary. The young get angry at institutions, but you can't do anything without them. Whenever two people get together, make a plan, and do anything of any import, you've got an institution. And institutions are necessary. Institutionalism is when you do it for a long time and you don't remember why you are doing it. If Tom and I had an experience of God, and and it was so awesome that we glowed with Shekinah glory, we would come into this place and you'd be really impressed. And then we would decide to start a new church, and we'd call it the Sons and Daughters of Heavenly Hope. He'd be the bishop and I'd be the assistant bishop. And because our experience was so awesome, you'd catch it too. Some of you are so creative. Some of you would write hymns and prayers. We'd put our headquarters in New York. We'd create a seminary. I mean, it'd be really cool. And our kids would be involved in it too, because the glory that we sense, they would sense, and they would feel it too. And then their kids, the next generation, they'd have it a little bit. You know, they could sing the hymns, and sometimes they'd catch a little bit of the shine. But by the time the third generation came along, they'd sing the same hymns. They'd pray the same prayers and go to the same schools, but they wouldn't remember why. That's institutionalism. It's when you do it because you've always done it. It's when you're the same because you've always been the same. It's when you do things even in ministry because that is what is done. It's the hardening of institutional arteries. Now, Joel teaches better than I do on form and function. That's way above my pay level, so I'm going to deal with the wine. That's more my level. What is the wine? Jesus here says, if you put new wine, and I assume that's him, and I assume that's us, in old wineskins, they're going to explode. What is the wine? What was so new? You could handle this in a lot of ways. You could talk about people that don't have any wine or any wineskins. They're atheists and agnostics. We ought to have compassion and pity for them. We could talk about people who have old wine and old wineskins. They're asleep. We should wake them up. We could talk about people who have new wine and old wineskins, and they're messed up with wine all over the place. We can clean them up. But Jesus said new wine. New wine. What is that wine? What was it that was so new that you had to create new forms? What was so it wasn't what he taught. Everything he taught was taught in the Old Testament. He was Jewish. Wasn't that? It wasn't miracles. Every miracle he ever did had been done by others. What was it? There was something new about the new wine that was so new and so fresh that it would sweep the entire world and change everybody it touched. So I move the previous question. What's the old wine? Well, if you look into this text, the first thing that you note immediately is that the new wine smells messy. Has to do with sin. Now, I'm not a connoisseur in this. If you do what I do, you get your choice of smoking or cussing or drinking. And I've already chosen two and can't afford the third, so I'm a teetotaler. If I ever preach drunk, no telling you think I'm offensive now. You have no idea. So I don't drink wine. It tastes like Kool-Aid gone bad to me. But as I understand it from people who know, new wine is the worst wine. It tastes like Ripple. And old wine is the good wine. So whatever Jesus was saying here, it wasn't necessarily a good thing about us. And then if you will, look at the 12th verse here. But when he heard it, he said, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Whew, I'm glad for that. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I came not to call the righteous, but to call sinners. Aren't you glad? That's what the new wine's about. It's messy. It smells. It doesn't. D.T. Niles said, we are beggars telling other beggars where we found bread. I agree with that, but I would expand it from that. We are confused beggars, present beggars. Messed up, screwed up beggars. Beggars who don't do it right and don't know how to do it right. Sinful beggars, lost beggars, confused beggars. And the only thing we know is where we found the bread. That's what we're about. And so the new wine, and that's us, has to do with messy, with sin, with things that don't work. I don't do it much anymore, but I used to do a lot of marital counseling. One of the things I did, and I don't think anybody else does this, I would say to the couple, look, before I marry you, you got to tell me 10 things that drive you nuts about the person you're getting ready to marry. And she'll say, I don't know of anything. I love him. And I want to say, well, get another preacher, because I'm not doing this for you. Because all you got's puppy love. And puppy's love is real to the puppy, but man, it ain't good for a marriage. So go out and find 10 things that tick you off about him. And he would say with his eyes glazed over, I can't think of anything. She's so beautiful. And I said, son, find 10 things that stink about her. And until you do, you get another preacher to marry you, because I'm not going to do it. That's It's true of us too. It's true of the church. This is a realistic dirt under your fingernails kind of thing. Before, we had a club where the good people went. Now we got a club where we can go. Sinners, people that don't know. I've been your friend for a long time. I knew your first pastor. I loved him. Still alive. That sounds like he's dead. He's not. I loved him. When you were meeting in a high school and you're just a little bunch of people, and now you're big and you got all this stuff. This is so cool. But I remember, you know the most salient thing about you throughout your history? Yeah, we're biblical. No, it's not that. I mean, you are, but you know the thing that defined you? Listen to me, because nobody else is going to tell you this. You didn't know what you were doing. Still don't. You really didn't. I can't tell you the number of times I heard from staff people, God keeps sending us these people and we don't know what to do with them. They're coming in groves and we don't know what to do. We don't know how to fix them. Now you're organized. Now you got the facilities. Now you got all the stuff, and that's good. But don't forget what you were, a little church of beggars, and now you're a big church of beggars. And if you ever think you've got this thing down, that you're together, that you're going to fix the world with your prowess and your organization, you're out of your mind. You don't know what you're doing. This thing is too big. It's too awesome. Remember that. When everything's together and we've got it organized, like organizing wildcats, when we've got it organized, then somebody stands up and says, I don't get it. I'm needy, I'm gay, I have AIDS and I'm gonna die. I'm thinking about suicide. My wife told me today she didn't love me and had to find herself. My husband left me and the kids. I don't make enough money to pay. I can't get it together. I don't want to go to another Bible study. It's crazy. Always be willing to listen to that. When you don't, you'll listen to the sound of exploding wineskins. So, wine, new wine, the new wine about which Jesus was speaking, smells messy, has sin, people that are needy, and sometimes can't get it together. I would suggest also from the text that the new wine about which, and I'm not making this up, this is coming from this, okay? I have better political views than you do, and better sociological views, and I have a degree in philosophy, and I wish I could tell you my views, but God said stick to the book. So these are not things I make up. But the new wine not only smells messy, it smells like caring. It smells like compassion. They say that a text, and you've heard it before, without a context is a pretext, and that's certainly true. This chapter is jammed full. It starts out with a paralytic man who gets forgiven, and then he dances. Then it goes to a tax collector, and the only thing worse than a tax collector was a pig farmer in the eyes of Jews, worse than Goyim. And he goes to dinner with a tax collector. What's with that? That's like going to dinner with a bunch of gays and lesbians who've been rejected by society. And then right after that, a girl died, and their parents loved her, and he brought her back to life. And right after that, there was a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years and wanted to touch the hem of his garment, and she gets healed. And then there are two blind, this is the same chapter. Then there are two blind people, and they get healed. And then there's a mute guy who starts singing. And then at the end, Jesus says, the fields are white unto harvest. Now, the scholars will tell you that the miracles of Jesus were done to shine a spotlight on who he was and what he taught. So we don't have miracles today. Now, what they say about the spotlight has some truth to it, but let me tell you, the reason those things happen is because Jesus looked at the paralytic and wept. He looked at the tax collector that nobody could stand, and the tears welled up in his eyes. He looked at the mute, and his heart was broken. At the blind, at the dead little girl. And the tears of God fell on the ground of the earth. It's compassion. It smells like caring, and you can't help it. When you got the new wine, it does that to you. You don't admit it, but every time there's something on television about Britney Spears, you watch. You know it's true. I got your number, babe. If there's a magazine like People in the dentist office, you go to the one about Britney Spears, don't you? I got your number. Every time there's a news report about Britney Spears, you go there, and I'll tell you something else. You say, my, the culture is going to hell in a handbasket. I said it. I do the same thing. And what about Paris Hilton? Wow. Can a preacher say, wow? What about Paris Hilton, man? She goes to jail and she's reading the Bible. I thought, that's cool. She's going to run to Jesus. And then she gets on the Larry King show and he says, you reading the Bible? She said, yes. He said, what's your favorite part? And all of a sudden she goes blank. Then she says, all of it. And I want to go, oh, geez. She had been reading the Bible. And just when I was getting ready to get in a pulpit and condemn the culture, I start crying. What's with that? I feel so sad. My heart breaks. I said, Jesus, why am I doing that? And he said, it's not you, it's me. But this goes on in the church too. I'm not going to do this, but we have people here who've just gone through a divorce and are dying. We have people that have been abused. We have people that have been told they're going to die because they got cancer. There are people here who are sinning and are so ashamed, who've struggled with temptation and failed. We got people here who are scared to death. They can't sleep at night because of a recurring dream of abuse that happened when they were kids. We got people here that are neurotic and uptight. And if I were to ask you, and I'm not going to, but to turn to the person next to you and say to that person with feeling, I am so sorry. 7 out of 10 would begin to weep, and the other 3 would have to struggle with it. So, new wine, when it happens, gets inside you and you care. Instead of when somebody's sinning, you don't say, how could you? You hold them while they weep. It means looking at your brothers and sisters and not in condemnation, but to know that life is hard. It really is for you and me, and we can't do this by ourselves. It's that kind of compassion. We're compassionate with the poor. We're supposed to do that. But I'm talking about a compassion that's not as politically correct as that. I'm talking about a caring that goes to the bone, to the heart, with Britney Spears and the person you're sitting next to you who would rather be any place in the world than in church. I'm talking about real. That's new wine. It smells like that. But the text doesn't just say that. It says the new wine smells messy. It's got bad stuff in it. The new wine smells like caring, but the new wine also smells like burning wires. Smells electric, smells like power. We sang about it. There's power. There really is. You remember when the Azusa Street revival took place in California, and most historians believe that was the beginning of the charismatic Pentecostal movement that swept the world and still is. These people came into our churches and they were dancing and they had seen God, and God was doing supernatural stuff, and cripples were walking and the blind were seeing, and they were so excited that even when they talked it sounded funny. And those of us who were in the main line stood in the pulpits and we said, my, it's either of the devil or it's of the flesh. And you know what they did? They made an obscene gesture and left. That's what they did. And they formed their own institution. Now, I'm not a Pentecostal, I'm not a charismatic, but there was fire there and we missed it. No new wine there. And we missed it. And one of the really cool things about our time is that we're coming back together as the body of Christ. And an old Presbyterian can sit over here and raise his hands. And the fire is there. Listen, God does stuff. He isn't a theology. God does stuff in people. I remember a girl from Britain that came to a church where I was the pastor, and we were having healing services. Do you believe that? And God did, well, never mind, did some really fun things. She came in one time. She wasn't a Christian. I loved her, but she came into the church. She stood in the middle of the aisle and looked around, and then she turned and ran out of the church to the parking lot, got in her car and left. And I said to her the next week, Sue, what'd you do that for? She said, because I'm not a Christian, and I don't want to be a Christian, and I knew if I had stayed, I would become one, and I didn't want to, so I left. That is power that does stuff, that changes people. In the last service, we had a whole 2 rows of people in wheelchairs. What's God doing there? What's God doing with your pain and your hurt? Listen, when Jesus is present, that's the new wine. And fathers come running back home. And drunks get sober, and kids who are rebellious fall on their knees, and God changes hearts, and he makes a difference, and because new wine smells like power. And if you're going to sit around on your posterior and talk about praise Jesus stuff, and it doesn't do stuff, it's not the new wine. You heard of well, it's an old sermon illustration about the woman who was in a mainline church, and the minister was talking about the doctrine of the sovereignty of God. Talked about God being omnipresent and omniscient and omnipotent and awesome. And she looked around. Nobody was saying anything. She wanted to say something. She wanted to open her mouth, but nobody else opened their mouth. And she just couldn't stand it, so she jumped up, raised her hands, and said, "Praise God." And usher in a 3-piece suit came over and said, "Madam, sit down. You can't do that in this place." Power that changes and gets underneath and does stuff. When it starts happening and you're uncomfortable with it, get out of the way, because you can hear the wineskins exploding. And then I got one more point and we'll go eat. What's the new wine? Smells messy. It's filled with sin. The new wine smells like caring. The new wine smells like electricity in a cord because it's powerful. But new wine smells like a party too. Look, if you will, down at the 15th verse. And Jesus said to them, "Can the wedding guests mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them?" And then Jesus said, sometime the bridegroom, he's talking about his death, he's going to be removed. Then they're going to fast and put ashes on their face and stuff, but not now. The bridegroom is there. The new wine smells like celebration. It smells like a party. Do you know what old wine skins are about? They're about control. Insecure people and control. That's what it's about. Do you know what the cross of Jesus did? It took the leverage away. People used to scare me to death. I don't care. There's no leverage. I don't have to be right. In fact, I'm wrong 50% of the time. I just don't know which 50%. Doesn't matter. I don't have to pretend to you that I'm better than I am. There's no leverage on me. You can say, "How could you do that?" And I'd say, "I don't know, but I'm going to do it again." I don't have to pretend about anything. Have you ever laughed at a real serious occasion, kind of maybe a funeral or something? And it's really not that funny, but once you start, you don't know how to stop. And then you say, I can't do this. This is a funeral. And then that makes it even worse. And pretty soon the bench is shaking with your effort not to laugh. I mean, there's a corpse there, and people are sad, and they lost, and you're giggling, and you're trying to stop it, and then it catches to the next person, then it goes to the next person, and you're thinking, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Do you know what being a Christian is, what new wine is? It's laughing at funerals. That's what the world is. Statistics 1 out of 1, we're all dying. And do you remember Malcolm Muggeridge? He was the best known personality in all of England. And he became a Christian when he was an old man. Some people said he was just too old to chase girls, so he decided to try Jesus. That may have been true, but he was such a delight. He wrote a book called Jesus Rediscovered. Then later on, he wrote a book called The End of Christendom. And he would be on television and say the most awful things about Christians, about the church, about the world, that it was going to hell in a handbasket. And you looked at him, you thought, that sucker's laughing. I mean, his eyes would twinkle, and he'd smile. And I would think, what's with that? I'll tell you what it was. He's laughing at a funeral. That's what Christians do. We celebrate. We laugh at a funeral. And Jesus on the cross took the leverage of the controllers away. And it is a sin to be controlled by the controllers. If you're forgiven, and you are, yes, I mean what you just thought of, that. If you're really forgiven, the laughter comes inside, and you can't help it. If you're acceptable, you don't care whether nobody else accepts you. If Jesus is fond of you, what do you care about other people being fond of you? The control and the leverage is gone. Let's get down. Let's have a party. Let's laugh. They said the early Christians were drunk. They ought to say that about us sometime. Even cold, conservative Presbyterians. That's a good thing, because when Jesus is present, and where is he right now? The bridegroom. He's here. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, I'll show and we'll have a party. I won't leave you comfortless. I'll come to you. Where's Jesus right now? He's here. And you don't mourn and you don't fast. When the bridegroom is attending the function, you party. And when you party and people get upset because they say it's unseemly, get out of the way, because there is the sound of exploding wineskins. Somebody this week told me about a man and his wife who went to his 25th high school reunion. And when they were having dinner, they looked over at another table. There was a woman who was plastered. I mean, she was blind drunk. And the man kept looking at her, and his wife said to him, "Do you know her?" He said, "Yeah, I used to date her. She was my girlfriend." Said, when we broke up, she started drinking. And her friends say she hasn't been sober a single day since that day. And his wife said, "My, don't you think celebrating for 25 years is a bit much?" It's about the wine. It really is. It's about the wine. The world says, have a drink and forget. And Jesus said, I'm the wine. Drink up and remember and be glad. And if you listen to what I taught you and you get around those who don't understand what I just taught you, and you hear wineskins being stretched, you know to run. You think about that. Amen.